5, 4, 3, 2, 1, 0. All engine running. Liftoff. We have a liftoff.
And welcome, everybody, to Truth, Beer, and Podsequences. If you're a first-time listener, thank you for finding us, and welcome aboard. If you have listened before, thank you for joining us again. My name is Marco. I am a brewer locally here in the Cincinnati craft beer area, and I am joined by the best podcast co-host.
I am Julia, and I like to drink all of the Cincinnati craft beers. What Truth, Beer, and Podsequences is, it is a podcast recap show where we talk about the Cincinnati craft beer podcasts that are out there, but we like to put our own spin on what they're saying, kind of make up a little bit about what's happening behind the mic, so to speak.
Well, it's our truth.
It is our truth.
I mean, we listen to the shows, we fill you in on the shows, and then we let you know our truth about it. So.
And we hope that there aren't too many consequences for the little truths or not so truths that we may sprinkle into our recaps of every episode. First off, I want to give a huge shout out to our host of the podcast, BC's Bottlage Montgomery, the place that Cintas keeps smelling super fresh, super clean all the time. The freshest smelling bottle shop in town. That's
right. And here at BC's Bottlage Montgomery here on Tuesday evening, if you hear any noise, it ain't the boys. It's ladies' night.
And this place is full of ladies. The most fantastic one sitting right across the table from me.
There you go.
This would not be a beer podcast if we weren't drinking beer, and we both have glasses in front of us. So, Marco, what's in your glass tonight?
I've had it on the show before, Julia. I'm drinking a Marionette from a Rhinegeist. Don't remember the particulars, and I can't really see the board, so I'll just make it up. It is, I don't know, 6.8% ABV, maybe not. The IBUs are minimus.
Very, very nice. I am drinking a beer that was actually on one of the podcasts that we'll be recapping later on in the show. This is the Chomp Strawberry Cheesecake Fruited Sour from the Brewery Projekt. It is 6.5%, and it tastes like you are drinking a cheesecake.
Yeah, I remember that.
We'll get into that in a little bit. Marco, what podcast did you listen to this week?
Well, all of them. I listened to all of them, and not all are pertinent to what we cover here. Mm-hmm. So we'll go ahead and shrink that list down.
What kind of podcasts are we going to cover on this show?
These are going to be the Cincinnati craft beer podcasts that are made and produced locally. I know one of the podcasts that I listened to last week was the Brew Travelers Outcast podcast.
Excellent. One of the ones that I listen to that is kind of halfway in our lane is the Craft Parenting podcast. It is a podcast mostly about parenting, but they do touch on drinking Cincinnati craft beer, so we will touch on just that specific part of this particular episode.
There was a podcast I was made aware of through some of the circles on social media that we follow. I listened to I've Been Thinking. Mm-hmm. And did you listen to I've Been Thinking?
I did. That's the one where Meryl, who is Cincy by the Pint, was on talking about the Beer, Booze, and Bonks Fest. So we're definitely going to be covering that one. I listened to one of the most fun podcasts that is in the Cincinnati beer podcasting world right now, Shift Beers.
Mm-hmm. I listened to Shift Beers.
Yeah. You actually spoke a lot of Shift Beers too, as we will find out.
Oh yeah, I was on that episode. And then Cincy Brewcast.
Yeah, all things Gnome.
Anything else, Julia, did you listen to?
I did listen to a Canadian craft beer podcast. Well, craft beer and absolute.
Okay.
They talk mostly about Canada's craft beers, things that we really don't get here in the States, and they do a lot of talk about sports, specifically hockey. But they did do a very nice shout out to both Truth Beer and Podsequences as well as Shift Beer. So I just wanted to touch on them a little bit on this episode.
I did listen to quite a bit of Neubert Report.
Excellent.
So, Julia,
Marco,
we've got, everything's happening here. It's a really bustling place here since it's ladies' night, and we have producer Ben Comer, BC.
The BC and BCs.
B and the C and BCs. What we went ahead and did before we turned the mics on, before the mics were hot, we had Ben choose the order of the podcasts, and believe it or not, it was the same order that we just went through.
I mean, it's almost like it was kismet. It was meant to be.
Yeah, fortuitous.
Yes. I guess we'll go ahead and get started with the Brews Traveler Outcast podcast. This was episode 13, and the gang went to MPH Brewing here in beautiful Montgomery.
Yes, Montgomery Public House. The team caught up at Montgomery Public House. The outline of the show is the Outcasts, and there's a rotating bunch of Outcasts. There's a pretty core group, but there are some rotating people in the group. Mark Miller leads that podcast. Super guy, knows a lot about beer, a musician, and somebody who's traveled. Did you know he used to live in Alaska?
I did not.
Yeah,
he is truly a Brews Traveler.
Yeah, Brews Traveler. And so they show up at MPH. Usually what happens is the outline of the podcast is they show up to the space. They talk about the space. They talk about Brews traveling. So if you're at this space and you want to go to a couple of other spaces, what other spaces are within, say, a 5-mile radius of that space? And then, after they talk about the decor and the Brews traveling, then they go and they usually get somebody that works at the space.
Correct. And this week they had Jim Chrisman, who is the general manager and one of the owners of MPH Brewing, on the show. He had a pretty neat story. His cousin founded
one of the founders
of Left Hand Brewing out in Colorado, and so the only guest taps at MPH Brewing are Left Hand Brewing beers, which means it is pretty much the only place in Cincinnati that you can get those. So, kind of two birds, one stone almost with that one.
So a little bit about the space. They have a pizza oven, and it's not. It's one of those wood.
Like a wood fire
pizza oven. One of the other owners, Mark, is the head chef there. And so you get pizza, salads, you can get sandwiches. They make everything there except the tater tots.
Are you a tots guy or a fries guy?
No, fries.
Fries all the way?
Oh, yeah, fries all the way.
Same here. I like tots, but if you give me a choice, fries all the way.
I'm not mad at them.
No,
I'm not going to kick them off the plate or anything.
I'll eat them if that's what they have.
Right.
But,
the space is set up more. I don't say more like a restaurant, but you get versus a lot of other breweries where you go in, it's this big industrial type feel and it's just real vast and open. It's a little more cozy like a restaurant.
Right. Beautiful outdoor space.
Nice outdoor space. They just extended their patio. It's a nice, sizable outdoor space. They talk about it. Well, I'm getting ahead of myself because they go through also when they bring somebody that works at the brewery, they go through rapid fire questions.
Yes.
And so the outdoor space comes up, but talk about the space a little bit more. The pizza oven, you can get your food there, and it's not like some of the other places where you've got to order your food at the place and pay for your food at the food place, and you order your drinks at the bar, and then you got to get your card and all this other mess. No, it's all together. You place your drink order at the bar, you place your food order at the bar.
Yeah.
Because it's all together. They aren't separate. This isn't a lease space for the food. So the brewery and the food are the same entity, really. And a little room that they have where they can host
small parties, small event space, and they're a part of the Montgomery Dora Zone, the designated outdoor recreation area. If you're familiar with the Montgomery area, this will make sense to you. If you're not familiar, it won't, but on the Montgomery Township website, there's a beautiful map of it. But the Dora Zone goes all the way from practically Moeller High School almost out to the Montgomery Square Kroger. It is an absolutely huge area that you can walk around with one of MPH's beers in your hand.
And I've done that. I have done that. I've walked with the Dora cups, the plastic cups. So you pay $1 for the cup, and you can get it, filled with the beverage, and then you can walk around through that area. Doesn't go quite to Moeller because they put in a brand new roundabout. It stops right as the roundabout starts. And so you go from essentially that roundabout all the way to the opposite end.
Right.
Pretty cool Dora area, and also Montgomery a couple times a year has some festivals where they close off the area and you can walk around not just with the Dora Cup, but you can have access to those events and get to MPH pretty easily. So you can take your family to MPH, and that's one of the other things, is that family friendly atmosphere.
Yes, for sure.
At the time, Jim had talked about a dog friendly being a no. But since that was released, they extended the patio and they did have a doggy day.
Okay, so there will be dog-friendly days, at least on the outdoor patio space.
Yeah.
Maybe not every day, but, hopefully on a fairly regular basis. I know for pretty much all of, I don't know if it's Cincinnati or all of Ohio, if you have an indoor restaurant space, not just selling, chips and pretzels from a microwave, you're not allowed having animals inside of the premises unless they are service animals.
Makes sense. And animal lovers, dog lovers, you ought to know that. Don't get bent out of shape on that.
So another thing that I wanted to kind of tie into briefly with both the idea of space and MPH brewing is Brews Traveler. As you already mentioned, they like to give you an idea of the other breweries that you can travel to that are within about a 5-mile radius of the brewery that they are at for that episode. And I'm not going to give away all the names, but I'll just say within a 6-mile radius, or just under a 6-mile radius of MPH Brewing, there are close to 9 breweries that you can travel to. So MPH is in a perfect spot for someone that wants to try a bunch of Cincinnati breweries but doesn't want to be going from the north side to the east side to the west side to the south side and then back again.
They also make mention of a couple of other places that really lean into craft beer. Where we're at right now, BC's Bottle Lodge, Montgomery, is within that radius.
Yes.
And so is Hop and Vines, which is just near the Kenwood area, which leans into craft beer quite heavily.
Yes.
As well as wine. And that's come up on the show a couple times.
And
we're going to need to have some wine.
One day we'll have wine instead of beer. Today's just not that day.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then, so they do rapid fire questions with the person that works at the brewery. In this instance, they're talking to one of the owners. It's a 5-head ownership group. They talked about the outdoor seating. They talked about the partnership with Left Hand. So how that came about. They also talked about the beers and the pilot system. The person who had the essentially homebrew system at their house, but this isn't making beer at 5 or 10 gallons a batch. This was a very large homebrew system.
Yes.
And so that's how they, prior to opening, had vetted out these recipes. And this homebrewer had been brewing for years. So these were recipes that they had been honing in for a number of years.
And speaking of their beers, one of them, Das Weizen, their Hefeweizen, actually just won a bronze at the U.S. Beer Open Cup.
As well as Summitator. Long story short,
they're
Das
doing great.
Weizen has won, Summitator, and then I think another beer has won. They have medals. They have awards.
Yes.
And then after they do the rapid fire question segment, they move into the beer drinking segment.
Yes, where they talk about what they're drinking. They rate them on Untapped scale, so kind of 1 to 5 stars. Matt, amazing job on your pronunciations. You did spectacularly this week. I know you're always concerned about pronouncing Hefeweizen correct.
Yeah.
You nailed it.
Yeah.
You nailed it.
Great job. It was fantastical.
So what else did you have on the Brews Travelers Outcast podcast?
They enjoyed the space. They enjoyed talking with Jim. They enjoyed the beers. They really had positive things to say.
Yeah.
I ran into Mark Miller 2 weeks ago at MPH.
Nice.
And we got to have beers, and we sat and talked with Mark, one of the owners who runs the kitchen. Had a good time, and I talked to Jim a couple of days ago when I stopped in for a couple of beers with my son Vincent, and he really enjoyed hanging out and talking with the Brews Travelers. It was a very positive experience from what he told me, and he he does get around to listening to some of the local Cincinnati craft beer podcasts.
Nice.
By the way, they have listened to Truth Beer and Podsequences.
Well, thank you.
And
We appreciate your listenership.
we sure do. And he's going to, of course, he's going to listen to the Brews Travelers Outcast podcast.
Yeah.
So hopefully that experience gets him to get into the Brews Travelers Outcast podcast and listen to a few more episodes.
Yeah, for sure.
What's cool about those episodes is you can still go back and listen to them, and most of the information, if not all, is still pertinent today about the space and the experience and getting in rapid fire questions with the owners.
Right.
So
It's a great podcast that combines both the fun of just a group of friends going out drinking, enjoying beers, having a good time rating the beers, and also that more educational piece where they do talk to someone from the brewery to find out what is your space like, how many parking spots do you have food, do you have event space, that type of thing.
Do you have live music? Do you have outdoor seating? Yes. Fun episode. I enjoyed it. And
As did I.
thank you for listening to our recap of that. And if that piques your interest, I not only encourage you to listen and follow the show, I encourage you to go to MPH and have a good time.
Yeah. And Marco, it looks like your glass is just about empty, even though we are only one podcast in. So
Well,
should we take a quick break?
We should, but
Okay.
for the listening audience, we've been recording some other stuff
Yes,
too. So
this is not. We are not multiple beers in, 18 minutes ish into this podcast. There have been other things going on for quite a while prior to this time. We'll be right back. We are back, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you so much for waiting those second or two in podcast time. Marco, you are back with a new beer. I am still drinking my glass of Chomp Strawberry Cheesecake, which is so incredibly good, but it definitely is a slower sip for me since it is a sour. You have a pretty good size glass in front of you. What do you have?
Yeah, so, this being Ladies' Night,
Oh, yeah.
I wanted to keep it crispy. And so I went and got a nice American lager at 4.8% ABV, only 10 IBUs. It is it's a yellow fizzy beer.
You're not going to say what handle it came out of? What tap you picked here at BC's Bottle Lodge, Montgomery,
Well,
for this?
here at BC's Bottle Lodge, Montgomery, to be fair to every tap handle,
You share the love.
I went ahead
okay.
and I ordered what they call the hipster handle.
Nice.
And so today it's Pabst Blue Ribbon.
Good old PBR. All right. Hey,
yeah.
whatever,
Well,
whatever,
it's PBR, so
hey, whatever works for you. No judgment here. Well, no, actually, there's full judgment here.
that's fine.
I am judging you across the table, but
That's fine.
it's all
No,
good.
it's okay.
It's all good.
It's okay.
So let's move on to the next set of podcasts that we have.
Okay.
Looks like we have Craft Parenting Podcast and the I've Been Thinking Podcast are the next two up in our repertoire. Craft Parenting Podcast, this is episode 32. And as I mentioned in our intro, when we covered what podcast we were going to be going over, a majority of this podcast is part two of Caroline and her friend going over kind of birth and child care, raising the wee little babies the first few days here in this amazing world. So it is not a fully beer-centric podcast, but they did record a good portion of it. Joe and Caroline recorded at their date night at Westside Brewing, and they talked a little bit about the beers they were drinking, and they even revealed a shocking secret about you, Marco. So we had to cover the beer portion of the podcast. I'll go over what they were drinking.
Please.
At Westside Brewing, Caroline was having their Blood Orange Common, which is absolutely delicious. And Joe was having Westside's Porter as well as their Munich Helles. And they really did go into a good conversation for just a few minutes about different beers and beers that you might not think you'd like. Just try beers that you've never had. Try a style you don't think you like. You might find a variant of that style at one of our amazing breweries that really hits home for you.
It's great advice. I mean, really, and people who get into craft beer, I mean, they like that. They do that. And for those of you who are new to craft beer or thinking about getting into craft beer, or have people in your life who drink craft beer and you don't quite understand it and drink yellow fizzy beers like PBR and don't see why you pay, $6, $7, $8 for a pint or 8 or 10 ounces of a beer. Just
or $20 for an ounce, depending
$20
on,
for an ounce. I mean, whatever. I mean, try it.
Yeah.
Try it. And
you never know.
You may not like it, but if you keep trying things, I'm pretty sure eventually you'll get to something that you'll like. So good advice there.
They did do a whole bunch of pronunciations of our favorite beer style, the Hefeweizen. Caroline did a very good job. They were worried that we were going to have to rake them over the coals for how they were saying it, but I will say they do better than Matt does most of the time. So
with the pronunciations.
Say props to them. As you know, on this show, pronunciation is key.
Yes, and I mean they, being involved as they are in heritage and the German society and German heritage, they
better pronounce it right.
But they also forgive. They talk in the podcast where, hey, you can pronounce it this way, you can pronounce it that way. Tomato, in sort of a way.
All you have to do is say that you're pronouncing it in a different region's dialect.
That's right.
And you're golden. You're 100% golden.
That's right.
On one of our previous episodes, Truth, Beer, and Podsequences, episode 9, there was a segment of us recapping the Craft Parenting Podcast where you played a little game that we need to bring back at some point.
We should, but that, for anybody who hasn't listened to that episode, I strongly encourage you to go listen to that part or the whole episode, please.
Yes.
I would really appreciate that. But also, that segment where we covered the Craft Parenting Podcast is something that still cracks me up, and I have to, being a little bit selfish here, I really truly proud of how that turned out, and it was totally off the cuff. I just, we sat down, turned on the mics, and okay, Craft Parenting Pod. I was like, all right, hold on a second, I'm gonna do something. Anyways, so we did the thing. Joe covers it in the episode.
When Joe listened to the episode, when Marco got to this part of our recap, Joe almost died, just like I almost died during the initial recording of this. So Caroline and Joe have realized you're trying to kill all of the Cincinnati craft beer podcasters. You are trying to take over that crown of king of the craft beer podcasts. From, I don't even know who has it in Cincinnati.
I mean, first of all,
you're going after all of us.
First of all,
I'm worried.
If I was doing that, would this be that overt? Secondly,
depends on how clever you are.
We're already the number one craft beer podcast that talks about craft beer podcasts in the Cincinnati area.
This is very true, and also number one in Lithuania.
Yep.
Yeah, heard it here first.
How about that?
We have also ranked higher than Shift Beers in the Canadian food podcast category on multiple occasions.
Yeah.
So, but again, it sounds like Caroline kind of exposed this dirty little secret that Marco wants it to be him and only him. So if you don't hear me on the next episode, he got me. I had fun doing this while it lasted.
Julia, that's not happening this week. That's
not this week.
Not at all.
This is a long-term effort.
This is a long, slow play here, Julia.
All right.
You're going to be around for a long time.
We're on to you, though. We know.
But watch out there, Joe and Caroline.
Oh, boy. Here we go.
All the guys would say she's my
he's doing the fake piano on the table, too. It's going downhill quickly,
Roses
guys.
Really
so wrapping up the Craft Parenting Podcast recap. So yeah, listen to Craft Parenting Podcast. It definitely is more of a niche for the parents. They do a lot of recaps of what their week was like, what they do with their families, things about pregnancy, birth, raising children,
nipple
all of
pads.
That. Nipple pads, lots of nipple pads this episode. But they do also talk about craft beer. They do home brewing. I believe Joe mentioned that they still have some of their own Schwarzbier left, which I haven't seen any of that show up here at BC's Bottle Lodge Montgomery. So.
Bring it to Beer, Booze, and Bonks, and we'll dome it in the parking lot.
Hell yeah. So yeah, give them a listen, and love listening to them expose the truth of the dark side of Marco.
So next,
Yes.
so Meryl, who is the
Pint of Cincy by the Pint?
Yeah.
I don't know. Does that work?
He's the person behind Cincy by the Pint. Meryl was on the I've Been Thinking podcast, and the I've Been Thinking podcast is recorded out in Kentucky,
In northern Kentucky. By Alana Grace. I believe I said that correctly. If not, I apologize.
When I get together with my siblings and my mom, every time if the word Kentucky always comes up, we always go Kentucky, because when we were young, the movie Last of Mohicans came out with over actor Daniel Day-Lewis.
Yes. So the I've Been Thinking podcast, episode 78 with Cincy by the Pint. They did a lot about the history of both Cincy by the Pint, which it is a little over a year old. It started during COVID as a blog, just something that needed to be done to kill the time while everyone was quarantined. But anyway, the big focus of the episode is he is one of the, I guess, co-hosts, co-creators of the Beers, Booze, and Bonks Festival at the Foaling Warehouse. He worked with the Foaling Warehouse owner, Joe Frank, about doing this festival. And he was kind of on the show to promote it and to promote his blog. And I don't know, it was a fun episode. It was definitely not a podcast that I had been aware of, and I'm glad he's getting out there.
I'm glad Meryl has the opportunity to get on different platforms and talk about what's going to be a really fantastic event, the Beers, Booze, and Bonks Festival over at the Foaling Warehouse, where there's 2 sessions. There's an early session, late session. VIP access gets you into the early session earlier, and VIP access gets you access to the after party for the late session.
It's the kick of the keg.
You've got open foaling, and for those of you who don't know what foaling is, it's combining bowling and
Chickens.
Yes.
Fouling.
Foul.
Much foul. Very wow.
Birds.
But yeah, it's a fun episode. If you want to learn more about Cincy by the Pint, who Meryl is, what Cincy by the Pint is, and about the Beers, Booze, and Bonks Festival, it's a great, roughly 30-minute listen, and go ahead and check it out. As one of the podcasts that is local, it is Northern Kentucky, and it touched on Cincinnati craft beer, which checks 2 of those boxes for the lane that our podcast is in.
Covered the festival that Truth Beer Pod's going to be at, and
yes,
rumor is so is Craft Parenting Pod.
Yes, so we may have to band together to ensure that you don't kill us on location at the Beers, Booze, and Bonks Fest.
No, it won't happen.
You never know.
You never know.
Oh, boy. Well, I am actually getting close to my glass being empty, and we still have Shift Beers, all things Gnome, and a special shout-out and a quick recap of the Neubert report to go over. So let's take another real quick break, and when we come back, let's cover Shift Beers.
Sounds good.
And we're back.
Hey. I wonder if the listeners are going to get that was from Outcast.
I don't know.
Outcast Roses. You know what I'm talking about?
No. Oh, yeah.
Come on now,
No,
Julia.
I don't.
You don't know?
I've had beers.
Okay. Very good.
I've had a beer.
You have a beer. A beer.
I've had a beer, and now I have another beer. You're still chomping away at your hipster PBR, which is cool. It's cool.
I may have made a mistake.
Do we need to take another break?
No. We'll take care of that in due time.
All right. I am having, for the very first time ever, Rhinegeist Penguin, which is on nitro. It is a blonde stout with cacao nibs and coffee, which sounds absolutely amazing for this really wonderful, crisp fall day. We are finally in hoodie season, and I love it.
Well, I'll go ahead and talk for a little bit,
okay,
that way you can have a little drink and then tell us what you think about the drink. I may have made a mistake getting PBR with...
Getting all those good tasting notes in here.
That's right.
As one does.
Yeah, get that. With the board and the cooler with the way it is, I'm giving love to the hipster handle, and somebody needs to. That sounded real weird. Sounded real weird, like I was doing
love to that hipster
something. I had it, and They also have wine on tap. Maybe one of these days, we'll, like we said earlier in the show, maybe
Do they still have Twisted Tea? Because they had the handle.
No,
Okay, I was going to say
they
you
have the
should've gotten
handle,
that.
and the handle is, I think that's a white wine handle there. So
Tricky.
yeah, but Julia,
Yeah.
Did you eat a little bit of that beer?
Yes, I did. It is really, really good. I like that it's really full-bodied, like a stout, but it's not overly heavy. I mean, it's probably kind of dangerous. I feel like because of how easy drinking this one is coming across, I could put away way more than I should before that nice 7% starts smacking me upside the head.
If we ever get back around to one of the original ideas that we had when we were forming Truth Beer and Podsequences, where we were going to have opaque or black glasses, and then we were going to do a little bit of a blind tasting. And I know this isn't blind, and I'm putting you on the spot here a little bit, but it is about tasting notes. If that was in a glass that you couldn't see through, would you think it was a dark stout?
No. I don't think I would.
So have you had Mayan Sacrifice from Darkness?
I have. It's been a while, but I have had it, and that I feel like that one is more on the stoutier side, if that makes sense. Like I'm not entirely sure how to describe it, but I feel like that one drinks heavier than this one does, even though they're both.
Maybe the nitro.
It could be, yeah.
Well, but the nitro is supposed to give it a little bit more body from the creaminess of the way that cascades.
Right, which is beautiful. I love watching a nitro beer just settle into your glass.
The two different gases, just how the CO2 versus nitro, how they just change the way a beer's profile is, the complexion, if you could call it that.
The instructions on the can that I will read say to shake vigorously, crack slowly, but not at the same time. They do have to specify, do not crack this while you are shaking it. I want to know who did that too.
Do not shake and crack.
Correct. And then pour vertically and enjoy, which normally I've had nitro beers before, and you shake them.
You enjoy them vertically?
I enjoy them horizontally most of the time.
Ah, very good.
But when he was shaking it, normally the can, you feel it, I don't want to say pressurized, it's already somewhat pressurized, but you feel it pressurize a little more, which is why you kind of crack it slowly.
It intensifies.
But he said
you might be able to squeeze the can slightly, and then as you shake it, it's tighter, firmer.
That's what she said. As you're anyway, we're gonna.
It's all good.
It's all good. You all know where I was gonna go with that one, so there's no.
They all wanted you to go there.
They wanted me to.
They need you on that wall, Julia.
Man, I'll jump off the next ship, I promise. But yeah, he said, "Oh, she got tight quick," which is another beautiful quote. There was a bit of. I'm glad that he cracked the can open on his side of the bar and didn't leave it up to me, because we would need all new podcast equipment again if I had been in charge. If I would have been in charge.
Is there a way to insure all of this equipment? Woo!
Let's ask the Shift Beers guys. They have almost the same setup that we do, so we can ask them. How do you insure your podcast equipment?
Oh my goodness!
Are beer spills covered as part of said insurance?
Oh my!
Oh.
So Shift Beers, rolling into Shift Beers. So Shift Beers.
Episode 55, Shifty-Five.
Shifty-Five.
Shifty-Five. Good. I am so thrilled that they're still doing this a year and 50-plus episodes later. It is some of the most fun that I have listening to any podcast.
It has been I don't even know how to explain. It's been a great podcast, a vacation almost.
Yeah.
When we listen to the different podcasts that we all listen to, whether it be informative, long form, whether it be, just the different ways that podcasts come about things. This one is just fun.
Fun, yeah. It's pure fun.
The only intention really is to let you hear a bunch of friends from work, after work, have some beers and talk about it. And so this episode was an episode where they were tasked with finding beers from a brewery that they had never had a beer from. Now, not the entire group as a whole, but each individual member of the Shift Beers podcast. And so you have Jangle, Josh, who is in social media and marketing. You have Beth, who's in graphic design. You have Chris, who runs tap rooms and provides great tap room experiences. You have Button.
Though I will say, he is no Cintas guy. I've been to the March 1st tap room. It is not as fresh and clean as BC's Bottle Lodge Montgomery.
Sorry, Chris.
Chris, get a hold of the Cintas guy.
Sorry, Chris. It smells like Baja Blast.
I mean, nothing wrong with that.
Yeah.
But I'm just
and
saying.
soon to smell like cranberries.
Yes. There's a little nugget for all of you.
Yeah.
Yeah. We're not giving you any more than that, but it's about to get a whole lot of Christmas up in that bitch.
Woo! Smell like Christmas. Anyways, and then
Crispy
Button
bits.
Brian, who is a brewer and distiller.
Yep.
And they were joined by a special guest.
They were.
Julia, one of your new, Instagram,
He is an InstaFriend, which kind of sounds like, I don't know.
Like you
that
just
sounds weird.
created
like
a
you just
friend.
created a friend.
Like
which-
it used to be the
Yeah.
old Instapop where you had the pie pan tin with the popcorn in it
Yep.
and the
Jiffy
weird
Pop.
lid, and then you
Those things
for
almost
those of you that
terrified me.
are for those of you that are under 30, you're like,
You're
what are
like,
you
what is
talking
going on?
about? But you would, hello kids. So back in my day, we used to put this popcorn, this pie pan tin on the burner on the stove, and we would shake it around and go boop 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 boop, and then you get some popcorn out of that. That's how we would do that.
100% accurate description of how that worked. Oh my God. But yeah, Lee was their guest, and he was one of the first people that posted and tagged his shift beer after the podcast launched. That is kind of his main claim to fame, and why the shift beer team always said, we need him on the show, and finally it happened.
Lee, really cool dude, and they mentioned in the show that Lee's smarter than all of us.
Legit.
He is his formal education is in nuclear engineering.
Yes, sir.
So, hats off to you, sir, for just the amazing amount of brain, that you bring to whatever it is that you do.
Not only is he a nuclear engineer by trade, by education, however you want to say it, but he also handled creating Center Twix.
That's correct.
Yeah.
Yeah. Center Twix blows your mind.
You always thought there was just a left Twix and a right Twix.
Right Twix, left Twix.
No.
Center Twix.
Center Twix, which I've heard those are the best Twix. So Lee, if you're listening to this and you still have any contacts from, that was several jobs ago. He currently works in the brewing industry. If you happen to have access still to some of these amazing sounding Center Twixes, drop them off at BC's Bottle Lodge Montgomery on your way to or from work one of these days, and let them know that they're for the Truth Beer and Podsequences team.
And Lee, one of these days, we're going to ask you to come and hang out with us.
Absolutely.
And be on the pod. So, what was it, about 30 minutes in? They recorded that episode on a Wednesday.
Yes.
Which happened to be a day where I was at the brewery that I won't talk about, doing brewing things. I was on my way home. And actually, I was not on my way home. I was on my way here to the beautiful and fresh-smelling BC's Bottle Lodge Montgomery. And nature was calling. And I needed to...
They had you on speed dial.
I needed to stop. And my depth perception of where March 1st was versus reality of where it was incorrect. For some reason, I thought...
So here's a question I have for you, Mark.
Yeah, go ahead.
You had to use the bathroom in a bad way. Like, it was one of those, I need to find somewhere, I don't think I'm going to make it to BC's. And your first thought was, as far as where can I stop to use the bathroom, was March 1st?
Yeah, I had to go to the pee-pee. And I thought, I'm coming up on Kemper Road, and I said, I'm just going to go right. I'm gonna March 1st is up there.
Right
I'm gonna go. This is true.
Yeah.
And so, I did that, and I text Jangle. Are you guys
did you text
here?
him, dude, can I use your bathroom?
No.
Oh, okay.
No.
Hey.
I mean, it's open. I just walked in and took care of it. And I went over. I texted him. He didn't text anything, which is fine. But I happened to look through where the offices were, and I saw his head. So I walked in, and then everybody turned around and looked at me, and the door flung open. Like it was
man.
And like,
Hi.
Marco, what's going on? And so anyways, I let them know, hey, I'm just here, and they invited me to stay. So I was on that episode of Shift Beers.
So speaking of your entry and your presence on Shift Beers, that actually plays a lot into this week's burp count for Shift Beers. So do you want to go over that now, or do we want to recap the burp count at the end of this?
No, let's get it over with, because there have been one or two times where we get into everything and we just kind of glanced over or missed the burp count. Let's do it. Let's get into it.
So there are two sets of numbers that I'm going to give here. So the burp count, for anyone that's new to the podcast, new to our recap of Shift Beers, is there's a little drinking game that we made up around listening to Shift Beers, because there are so many repeatable moments in the show that you could make any number of drinking games out of. The one that we picked was the number of audible burps each episode. They do not hold back. So this episode, in the first 48-ish minutes, so prior to Marco showing up, they only had 20 burps. Now, granted, their numbers do tend to be lower when they have guests on the show, because there is a lot more kind of talking conversation. I feel like they're kind of holding back a little bit, not trying to be as boisterous with their burps as after. But after Marco came in, Marco reminded them, hey guys, we're counting.
I did remind them.
We are counting. So in the episode, which was a little under 2 hours, it was a longer episode, but it was a great episode.
More guests.
So don't let
I
that
apologize.
More guests. Marco did an awful lot of talking that Josh just didn't bother to cut out. I'm sorry,
but I'm not going to apologize.
No, you shouldn't. You shouldn't. 100% unapologetically you. The first 48 minutes, they had 20 burps. They ended the episode, so roughly an hour later, the total 78 burps.
You're welcome.
Which at 2 ounces per burp, so every time I kind of cut off where my explanation of it, for every time they burp, you take a drink. The average drink is 2 ounces per burp. We count up the number of ounces to figure out how many pints you would have had to drink during the episode. 78 burps is equivalent to 156 ounces, which equals, in the roughly 2-hour episode, you would have had to have consumed 9.75 pints. This blew their previous record of 6.75 pints, which was 54 burps back in episode 52, Terrible Beer Names, completely out of the water. So you guys did a damn good job. Marco, I credit you with encouraging everyone to really make this happen.
Yeah, and the Shift Beers crew, I mean, I was sitting right in between Beth and Butt and Brian, and I caught Beth just kind of letting it one of those SBDs, like silent but deadlies. And I was like, Beth, I mean, you got to bring it. You got to bring it.
Yeah.
And
the rest of the team is counting on you.
Yep. And Lee also, he's like, oh man, I forgot about that. I was like, you got to lean in, you got to do it. And honestly, totally get it. As a guest on the show, first time I was on the show,
right.
It was not in my nature, and so. But I mean, when you're on that show, you got to do it. Got to bring it.
Yeah. So good job, guys. That's going to be a tough one to beat, I think. But you never know. Maybe their next seltzer episode, because we know they bring it on the seltzer episodes that they do. Yep. 78. That's the number that you have to beat.
They had beers from breweries that they had not been to. But the thing is, I mean,
that they hadn't had before.
Hadn't had before.
Yeah.
You're going to recognize the names. I encourage you to go listen to the episode. yes, it's a little bit longer, but they have guests,
Still,
and with the more guests, as we found on our show, when you have more people, you tend to go a little bit longer. Anyways, fun episode. And at the very end of the episode, I guess we say they had 3 guests because they called the Gnarly Gnome.
Yeah. So before they called the Gnarly Gnome, though, just to kind of go back to what they did, some of the featured breweries that they had not had beers from before. One was the Brewing Projekt, which is who made the first beer that I had tonight, the Chomp Cherry Cheesecake Sour. Absolutely amazing. Free Thought Brewing, Catawba. Yeah, no one said it the same way twice, so why should I? Brewing, they had, I think Lee brought a beer from Little Fish. He had never had anything there. And that beer got
the best beer.
That got a triple bussin'. And Unbrau's Fin du Monde, which Beth told a story about how she has literally bathed in that beer.
Le Fin du Monde.
Le Fin du Monde.
So Chris told a story where he had at the Crowbar, which the Crowbar is the bar at Kroger.
The Creuset, yeah. It's a very fancy place.
Yeah, where he got he had some New Belgium's Le Terroir, which means from the earth. And those of you wine enthusiasts know terroir is something that is talked about in wine circles because of the effect that the soil, they feel that they can connect to the soil from
so like crunchy granola hippie kind of shit.
Yeah, where you go in and like, the terroir on this year and this vintage and whatever. Anyway, New Belgium's one of the best beer blenders, barrel blenders that are going around.
There,
anyways, he had a growler of freaking La Terroir. A 64-ounce growler of this.
A lot.
That he was just housing at his kids' sports ball activities.
As long as you're being safe with it.
We're not judging.
No, as long as you're being safe with it.
I'm just recapping part of the story.
Is true. So some of the other things that happened in this episode of Shift Beers, they did 2 rounds of Banger in a Box.
Yeah.
Which you can listen to them, to these happen on the podcast. One round was guest versus guest, Marco versus Lee. The other round is getting towards their elimination round. It was Chris versus Beth. Now, you can listen to this, or if you want to contribute on their Patreon, you can actually watch the video they're planning on once the entire Banger in a Box competition between everyone concludes. They're going to cut together all the videos of the individual face-offs into one long video, and it is going to be hella worth it. Step 1.
Get a box.
See, again, you go to get a box, I think of New Kids on the Block, and I can't do it.
Step 2.
There's so much you can do.
Put a hole in that box.
Oh my God.
Okay.
That's not the banger that they were talking about in that box, but
fits the show though. So
it does. It tracks.
And then they call the Gnarly Gnome, or do you have more notes prior to calling the Gnarly Gnome?
Just some stuff about their bonus beers. They had a shit ton of bonus beers.
Tell me about it.
None of them, well, very, very few of them, were beers that Marco could drink. So,
yeah, I really couldn't drink anything. I did taste sips, like a little, just to comment on the beer, because I needed to be careful, because the thing is, I was very exhausted, and I that's neither here nor there. I had a fun time with the Shift Beers crew. It was really fun, really great meeting Lee. The beers they were passing around. This is actually a little bit of the, I don't want to say problem, but a little bit of the things that I have to navigate. Let's put it that way.
Yes.
In the craft beer industry, when we get around and we want to have fun, we want to pull out beers, we want, share beers. I just, it's unfortunate that I can't join in on some of that liquid fun that all of you have. And by the way, I hate calling beer liquid. That came up in the show episodes ago. It's like calling beer liquid, douche or no douche. I apologize about it, but
sometimes saying liquid fits within the the train of thought that you have, even though as soon as you say it, Marco and I, we both drop our heads in shame.
Yeah.
Tail between our legs.
I felt bad about it, actually, right there.
Yeah. You should. You should feel bad about it.
I do.
Okay.
I do.
Just
I
checking.
do. I'm not. I do. I feel bad.
Yeah.
I get that in this culture that you having these big beers or these beers that are of this way,
right.
whether it be adjuncted stouts with lactose or sours with these bugs in them. I get that you're proud that you have them, you want to share them, and I'm not here to urinate on any of that. I want everyone to have them and enjoy them and share them. It's just tough for me to. I don't mind in a circle like that. I don't mind being excluded, but on the same hand, on the show, we're looking for content.
Right.
So I did take a little bit of mini beers, and when I say a little bit, is like just to where
enough,
I could,
yeah.
just enough to where my tongue could taste it,
right.
and then comment on the beer. But other than that, I mean, my beer consumption was very, very low on the show. But nonetheless, had a great time.
Yeah. Marco Freeman called the gnarly gnome.
I
near the end
did.
of the episode.
Yeah, Marco Freeman
that was
called
amazing.
the gnome. The gnome was ready and available to pick up the phone, so there was a cool little interaction there. So the gnome went into what he's doing, and it ties into the show that we talked about a little bit before. I mean, Gnome's talking about beers, booze, and bonks, and as he should be, because it's a big deal. It's a big thing happening. It's the first year for beer, booze, and bonks, so he talks about that.
Yep.
And after beers, booze, and bonks talk with the gnome,
everything kind of wrapped up.
Yeah, we wrapped up, and everyone fist bumped and said hi, and I missed the opportunity to trade info with Lee. I feel terrible about it. Lee, find me. Find me.
Marco.
I know you found Julia. Find me.
Marco is not on the Instagram yet. He is still kind of slow to the get-go there.
Slow.
It's
I'm
okay.
just slow.
But I mean, reach out to Marco via @TruthBeerPod if you don't already have him on his Twitter handle, which I don't know if he wants to share that. They kind of
look, if you follow us on
my handle, but that's okay.
If you,
it's fine.
They went ahead and put it in the show notes.
I know, everywhere. Everyone knows how to find me now.
Chris is like, oh, and then shouted it out.
At least you stopped him in the middle of releasing my phone number, because that would have been annoying.
Well,
you
I'm here for you, Julia. So, Lee, find me, buddy.
Yes. And then we'll have you on our show next time. I know that you have a hell of a commute every day, but if you ever have the time,
we can break that commute up, and
we'd love to have you.
Yeah, he was at BC's Bottle Lodge, Liberty, prior to that recording to pick up some beers. So thank you for supporting BC's Bottle Lodge. Yeah.
Last note that I had was next time you are at March 1st and see Beth or Josh or Chris or Brian, ask them how the fruit flies are doing.
They're raging.
All right. Well, Marco, I have noticed, the Shift Beers recap is typically a longer one because they have so much fun with the podcast. We have so much fun listening that we go on and on and on about it. But definitely check them out at Shift Beers everywhere. Support them on Patreon. Tag Shift Beers on all the social medias. They will retweet, re-Instagram, re-Facebook, repost, all of the things. And Marco, I think you look like you might need another beer. So should we take another quick break before we wrap up with all things Gnome and the Neubert Report?
Yeah, let's take a break and we'll be back.
Let's do it. Ladies and gentlemen, we are back.
Hello. And don't forget, it's Ladies' Night here at BC's Bottle Lodge, Montgomery.
Mark is wearing his shiniest heels for the occasion.
Yes.
Gives him another 3 inches that his wife wishes he had.
That's right.
Oh man. So I am still drinking my Penguin. It is absolutely delicious. I love this beer so much. I am ashamed that I haven't had it prior to tonight. But hey, No time like the present.
Exactly.
Marco, you have another big-ass Guinness glass that is full of a liquid that is definitely not Guinness.
No, I'm having Dogfish Head's 60-minute IPA.
Excellent. That's a lot of 60-minute in that glass.
Thank you.
So we're down to our last podcast segment.
Let's do it. We have what? All things Gnome.
All
we're
things Gnome.
not
Well,
all that.
almost. Yeah, not all things Gnome. What we're going to do is we're going to cover all things Gnome, and then we are going to cap this episode with the Neubert report.
Yep. Neubert report out of Canada.
Saskatchewan. To
Saskatchewan.
be exact. My Canadian accent was 100% not on point, but I think the boys up north will forgive me for
They
that.
seem to be pretty forgiving
Yeah,
and complimentary.
for sure. But we'll get to that. So, Gnome stuff, as I have written down in my notebook of podcast notary, this week's episode of Prost. He drank 9 Giants Cherry Churro Couverine, which is both an amazing name for a beer and also an incredibly hard name to say.
Am I behind on Prost or something? I felt like I saw. Okay. Anyways.
Okay, so let me go back in my notes for the last Prost because the last Prost episode was, we covered it on last week's episode, Arche Brewing, the dark milk stout. Or I'm sorry, that was a pasty stout, which, milk
Yeah,
stout.
pasty.
So did you not watch this week's Prost? Are you behind in your gnomeness? Marco's
I thought
falling
it was
behind. Took 13 episodes, but Marco has finally missed one of the marks.
Hold on a
that we
second.
tried.
I'm looking into this. I don't feel like I did.
So while Marco's trying to look up to see if he has in fact watched this episode of Prost or not, the Gnome is doing a lot more in the way of video production and video products. So give him a follow. TheGnarlyGnome.com/YouTube is the easiest way to get to his YouTube channel. So go ahead and give him a follow. Watch his videos. He does amazing work. Support him at gnomecreative.com for anything that you might need as far as audio, video, or imagery needs. Support him on Patreon, thegnarlygnome.com/support. Buy tickets to beer, booze, bunks, binks, boinks, banks, blips, bloops, blops at thegnarlygnome.com/tickets. Basically, what I'm trying to say is go to thegnarlygnome.com for absolutely everything you need to know that is gnome-centric. And Cincinnati craft beer-centric. He really gives it to you all. Marco is still scrolling through YouTube on his phone. He doesn't know what he's doing. See, I knew.
I saw this one. I don't want to reveal when I saw this one because it was after. it was after watching some television shows and having a few drinks, and yeah, I watched it.
There
but
you go. He didn't retain anything from it.
I didn't. No,
So-
not from the episode. I probably had some. I don't know. Otherwise retention. But anyways,
Do you
go ahead.
remember what the beer was? What kind of style it was? No, you're not allowed to pick up your phone
No.
to read the notes.
don't
Oh my
remember.
God, he's trying to cheat. So 9 Giants.
This is an open book quiz. By the way, from the lady
my
who
notes.
has notes.
Whole notebook out. So 9 Giants Cherry Churro Couverine is an imperial porter aged in Sazerac, rye, and Eagle Rare barrels. That is a mouthful to say, but it sounded like a freaking fantastic beer. He was saying that having some wax doodads that smelled like this would be awesome.
Yes, he did. I remember that.
Yeah,
The wax doodads.
Which, take that as you will, people.
No, I think, first of all, I don't know if anybody out there in our listening audience can make wax doodads where you burn them in a little sort of
Like a little wax
pottery
melter thing, yeah.
or
Yeah.
melter thing. But
Ours is glass. Josh and I have a glass one with a frosted glass little dish that we put the little
I think-
waxy doodads in.
that's a great concept. I'd love to own one. I don't own one. But if you can make the wax doodads or even full candles, I'm
Ooh.
totally,
Into that,
I am
yeah.
totally on board with some of these beers and the way that they smell being part of the overall odoriferous ambiance of
Mm-hmm.
a dwelling.
Yeah, it's, when Josh and I went down to the Buffalo Trace Distillery a couple years ago, we had gone down to Louisville for an elevator music concert, as he likes to to say. I will give you the brief story on that because it is pretty funny. I definitely have a good sense of humor about it. There's an artist that I really enjoy that is kind of like ambient techno. It's a 3 to 4 piece band that does this music, so it's not one guy pushing buttons. They were doing a live show in Louisville, which this artist is, the name's Tycho, Tycho. They're based in the West Coast. They never come over to the East Coast. When they were playing in Louisville, I was excited, wanted to go see them. We went down to see them, saw the show. I thought it was great. Josh put up with it for me. We were driving back, and he was like, that was elevator music. We just went to a concert for elevator music. And I went, no, it wasn't. It's just, really nice, relaxing.
Like a John Tesh show.
Sure, yeah. I mean, kind of, yeah. So we got back to the hotel, stepped into the elevator to go up to our hotel room, and one of Tycho's songs was playing in the goddamn elevator. He was right. It was an elevator music concert. I laughed so hard at just the complete coincidence of it all. But anyway, so yeah, wax doodads.
Wax doodads.
I want to know if because he mentioned that he wasn't sure if he was going to share any of this beer with Mrs. Gnome.
He did mention that.
I want to know, didn't Mrs. Gnome get any cherry churro couverine, or did Gnome kind of keep that all to himself down in the basement studio?
Well, we'll have to ask him next time we see him. Next time we see him might be at Beer, Booze, and Bonks. Chance we might see him before then. You never know.
Yeah.
And I'd like to think that he might have shared, but maybe not. You never know.
Yeah. With that guy, it's when it comes to beer, you never know. He might have decided.
Isn't he holding on to some beer for you?
I thought he was holding on to some Utopias for us.
Well, there's that. There's the Utopias. And then wasn't there another...
There was something that he had mentioned.
Yeah.
And I don't remember what it is. So
I'm sure he remembered.
I'm sure he remembered.
And I'm sure he's holding on to it.
Yes. So Weekly Pint. Let's move on to the Weekly Pint.
Yep. Yeah. I was there. You were there.
Yeah, we were all there. There was another Oktoberfest showdown. It was between...
Sonder and Braxton.
Yeah, two heavy hitters in the Cincinnati Oktoberfest world. Not going to tell you who won. You'll have to watch the recording of the Weekly Pint.
I knew when he
out.
started, but anyway.
I had an inkling, but it was still, very similar. We can't smell or taste what he's doing on the Weekly Pint, but he shows you the glasses, very, very similar looking.
We don't
beers.
take hallucinogens like that.
Maybe we should. Maybe we should be like, I totally experienced that with you, man. It was awesome.
Chris probably does from Shift Beers.
Speaking of Chris, Gnome shat all over Natterdays.
Okay.
He
did.
Good. They're good. They're not like
you're allowed to like
cream
them.
Of the Ooh. Are you saying that you're on Gnome's side when it comes to Natterdays? Careful. Choose your words carefully.
I'm saying that.
I just muted Marco for a second.
Which my wife loves. My wife, shout out to my wife.
Shout out to you, Rachel.
Who listened to the show. Thank you. She did tell me that she was jealous of the fact that
I have a mute button.
You have a way to mute me.
Yeah. I would never do it I would never do it in hostility. I would never do it as a way to actually silence you. I try to keep it for the comedic value.
There you go.
As much as possible. But you push me. That red light's coming on and it's not going off. So anyway, back to the Weekly Pint.
I've had a red light on before.
Hey, Roxanne? Do it, Marco.
That's right. Roxanne! You don't have to put on the red light.
Oh, man, ladies and gentlemen, this is what I deal with every week. And it's great. It is wonderful. I love it. I have such a good time here. Let's get back to the Weekly Pint. We've had beers, so we are way in the weeds with
No, we're good.
This one. We're
and we
good,
have had beer, but we're fine.
We're very
So the Weekly Pint, yes. The Oktoberfest showdown, he did one or two label approvals?
There were two label approvals that he showed off, both of them, which I'm pretty excited to try when and or if they hit, because just because a label is approved does not mean that the brewery will necessarily release the beer. I feel like it's a 90-95% of the time when you see a label, that beer is going to be coming out, but sometimes things happen. But yeah, there were only 2 labels this week. Both of them looked awesome.
They did. And then he talked about the fact that Cincy Brewcast wasn't up Monday morning. He was going to record Cincy Brewcast for the second week in a row after the Weekly Pint.
Mm-hmm.
Let's see, what else did he talk about on the Weekly Pint? I'm trying to remember.
He kind of took us behind the curtain a little bit for the Beer Booze Bunks Fest and kind of let us know a little bit about it. It is not going to be, and as the name implies, it's not going to be just beer. It is going to be mostly beer. There are going to be some of the local breweries that provide or that sell and produce and create seltzers, cocktails, that type of thing. There will be some seltzers that he talked about. There is kind of a slight
he did reveal
seltzergate about not announcing who he's having. So we all kind of rebelled and said, no, you need to tell us who is going to be there. And he's like, I can't. Since
not whose or what, but that it will be there.
Correct. And even though he said at one point during the Weekly Pint, when, Mark and I are still holding out hope that Utopias will be at the Sam Adams booth, tent, table. I'm not sure exactly what the setup is going to be. Gnome said at first, Utopias will not be there. And then he went back and said, well, I don't know if they want to bring it. It might be
there. You go.
So I'm still saying there's a chance.
There is a chance.
There is a chance.
There is a chance. And where there is a chance, we will have hope.
Yes, and where there is hope, we will be there with our glasses raised out in front of us to ask, please, sir.
Please, sir.
May we have a little more?
Can I have some more?
I love that we were on the same page with where we were going with that. We weren't even looking at each other.
No, we weren't.
But no, it's always fun just, I guess, sitting around drinking with everyone that is a part of the Weekly Pint. Everyone either chats on Facebook, YouTube, Twitter, wherever you happen to be watching the stream. Gnome puts up the number for the drunk line, so you can call in if you want. And it's just a nice little mini happy hour where you just kick back, relax, have a drink while you chat with people across the internet.
I have called in on the drunk line a few times.
You have.
And
it's always great.
Oh, thank you. And I always feel like I have at least pertinent comments. Maybe they're not. I don't know. But I like to think they are.
Yeah.
And I encourage anybody who's listening to this and joins on the Weekly Pint that if the spirit moves you, go ahead, do it.
Yeah, absolutely. I believe you've called in. Zach Hawley has called in.
Matt Damaris has called in a few times. Chef Tony,
right. Calling into the Weekly Pint is not something that is like a foreign. It never happens once in a blue moon. It doesn't happen every single week. But yeah, join in on the fun. Have a drink with us on Monday nights. It's typically between 9 and 9:30. Just depends on how everything's going. With getting his kids to bed and all that kind of stuff. But it's always a good time. I always look forward to Monday evenings hanging out with everyone on the Weekly Pint.
Well, that, in fact, if you go all the way back to episode 1, I don't even remember if we covered it or not. It's how we connected to eventually end up creating Truth, Beer, and Podsequences. Yeah. So you never know. So, I guess that kind of wraps up, at least for me, Weekly Pint, because it was just like a nice general conversation that happens. It's not, there's no agenda, there's nothing to really say, and on this part or on that part. So let's move into the episode of Cincy Brewcast that Gnome recorded after the Weekly Pint, talking about fall beers. Yeah, so he was talking about fall beers, and so he was drinking essentially another one of the Oktoberfest that he had just talked about. He goes into talking about pumpkin beer. His talk takes us back to back in history to when the Pilgrims and before the United States was a union, probably when Jangle said the milk froth was created, that they used pumpkin in the beer. One of the oldest, if you can call it adjuncted, one of the oldest adjuncted beers in what is North America was
a pumpkin beer. Yeah, he said that pumpkin beers have been around since the 1700s. Would realize that pumpkin beers have been a thing for so long. But again, it makes perfect sense when you think about
forever.
Yeah, for sure.
Forever ago. What's cool too is even though the episode was short, he talks about how Oktoberfest fit into the season, pumpkin beers fit into the season. He does his Oktoberfest showdown, and then he goes into his giant Halloween sort of fun that he does with the family, where he takes pie pumpkins. He goes and he gets like 8 or 10 pie pumpkins, and he takes the top off the pie pumpkins, and he scrapes out the flesh of the pie pumpkins, and he roasts the pie pumpkins, and he's all about creating these cocktails and different drinking experiences. And so if you're lucky enough to get invited to the Gnome's house for Halloween, what you end up doing is he has all of his leftover cans of Oktoberfest, ice cold. And then what you get to do is he has this whole pumpkin bar set up. So you get your pie pumpkin gourd, and then you
roast
can
it so it's nice. The natural sugars and have been caramelized.
And you dump your Oktoberfest in there, and then you have some seasonings, and you have little whipped cream, and you can just create your own a pumpkin beer experience.
I am really hoping that we get an invite to that this year, because it sounds amazing.
It's amazing.
Or you know what? Even if we don't get an invite, we could just say we're trick-or-treaters and just show up.
Yeah, just show up.
Yeah.
I could dress like you. You could dress like
you.
Yes.
Oh my God,
and we could just show up.
This is perfect. He does dig into kind of his idea of what is a fall beer. And I felt like that was very in line with what I consider to be a fall beer, like a pumpkin beer, Oktoberfest, so Märzens and Fest beers, something that is, bold and flavorful, but not super heavy. So something that on those days where, as he put it perfectly, it starts off a little cool, but then it gets a little warmer. So maybe you have to take off your hoodie because it is, the sun's come out. A beer that fits that the entire range of weather that is Cincinnati in the fall.
Yeah, he was creating this picture, right, where he was outside and the weather was crisp, and there's a fire pit, and he's enjoying the outside, and maybe he's got a cigar, maybe he doesn't.
Right.
It's his vision of outside during this time of year, and what does he want to have to drink.
Yeah.
And for all of you, I encourage you to think about essentially your happy place, your relaxing place. What do you want to have? And we're not judging you if it's not a pumpkin beer, if it's not an Oktoberfest, if it's not a
West Coast IPA.
A West Coast IPA.
Right.
I mean, have what you enjoy.
Just enjoy it, yeah.
Just know that if you're going to have me there, look, I can't have lactose, and I really like Pilsners, and I don't mind porters. I don't mind stouts. They got to be dry stouts, and porters can't have any adjuncts.
Basically, just pour him a couple PBRs, and Marco will be good.
Well, I'll have fun with you.
Yes.
I will have a good time, And then if Julia comes around, have the good shit. Break out the good shit. Break out the good shit. I should have some of that stuff that I can't drink at my house, just for an occasion if Julia and Josh show up, so that I can provide you with some healthy libations.
Excellent. Was there anything else that you really had about Cincy Brewcast, or anything else Gnome specifically? Go to thegnarlygnome.com. Support him in all ways possible. Patreon, YouTube, like, share. And do that with all the podcasts that we talk about.
Please
not just
do.
the Gnomes. I feel bad that I always neglect to shout out all of the other podcasts, social media, all that. I remember half the time. I don't remember the other half of the time. But really, our main goal for this is to get you interested in what these other podcasts are doing, so that you can go and listen to them and support them. And by supporting them, they put out new content, which means we get to stick around and talk about them.
Yeah, we're going to be around and talk about the other podcasts, and the content for our show comes around every week, fresh and new.
Yes.
And
fresh as the Cintas sky, leaves BC's Bottle Lodge, Montgomery.
Beautiful. But we do encourage everybody who listens to us to please follow and support us, like, comment. All of the negative comments should go where?
Just send them to Raging Hop, and Django will take care of those.
Yeah, Raging Hop on Twitter.
Yep.
Everything else, you can find us at Truth Beer Pod everywhere. I'm talking to you, Sam Adams, Taproom. Find us. And what I want to do next is talk about a show that does like and does support us. So we're not done. We're going to talk about one more show. And that show, Julia,
is the Neubert Report. As we mentioned in the beginning of the episode, the Neubert Report kind of halfway fits our wheelhouse. It is not a Cincinnati podcast. They do not talk about Cincinnati craft beer. They are from Canada. They talk about Canadian craft beer. And they talk about sports, mostly hockey. I actually started listening to them because Shift Beers mentioned them many times. The Neubert Report actually created almost all of the sound clips that you hear from Shift Beers Drinkin', the new Bonus Beers episode, the song Regina. If you've listened, you know exactly what I'm talking about.
Right. So the ones that aren't directly pulled from the guests on the show.
Or SpongeBob. Correct. But no, I definitely want to shout out Neubert Report again because they mentioned something in their latest episode about the podcasting community. It really is a community. We all support each other regardless of location. Just because we aren't able to experience the Canadian craft beers that they can experience doesn't mean that we don't enjoy listening to them talk about what they're drinking. I mean, that's what it's all about, experiencing or, listening to them experience these beers, because we know that we have the same reactions to the Cincinnati craft beers that we have access to. So just want to say that thank you for supporting us. We love supporting you. Apparently, after we shouted them out, one of the previous episodes, their Ohio listenership numbers jumped up through the roof. I have a feeling that the only reason that we occasionally chart on the Canadian food podcast charts is because the Neubert Report has mentioned us and Shift Beers. They apparently threw out a slight challenge, or there was a challenge thrown out that if Shift Beers, because I believe they peaked on the Canadian food podcast chart like in the 90s and we peaked in the 70s, if they ever beat us, get a higher ranking, we have to chug ices, Smirnoff ices.
Didn't that come up in Shift Beers?
It did come up in Shift Beers, but the only way we show up on the Canadian charts is really because is because the Neubert Report has mentioned. So I wanted to give them a big shout out about thank you for listening, for supporting us, same way that we're supporting you guys. I love watching you on YouTube. Hopefully the video issues get kind of worked out. I did do a burp count for you guys for your latest episode.
Get into it,
They always
Julia.
say episode 12, season 2. I'm sorry, but as an American, I have to say season 2, episode 12. I have to do things in the right order that way. I'm sure that the guys will forgive me for that one. So their previous burp count, which I mentioned on our episode 11, 2.87 pints. They had about 23 burps, but it's just two guys talking, so they don't have a lot of, I don't want to say dead air, but when you have something like Shift Beers, you have multiple people talking, so you have 3 other people that can be burping to get those numbers up. But I will say that in this episode 12 of season 2, I said it correctly for you guys, they brought it with 36 burps, which is 72 ounces, or in Canadian, 2,129 milliliters, which means that you would have drank 4.5 pints during their show, which tracks. They tend to drink 4 beers per episode.
Pretty good.
They had enough beers to hit all 4 pints and then a little bit more. So thank you, Neubert Report, for having fun with us. We love having fun with you guys, and keep rocking it. You guys have a great show.
Yeah, you do. And thank you for the shout out and the kind comments. I truly appreciate all of it. And podcasts happen podcasts. That's really what we're about. That's what our show is centered around.
It's about driving you to listen to these other shows that you might not listen to. I actually just remembered one of my other notes that I did want to shout out on the Neubert Report. They drank a beer, an apricot wheat that they kind of compared to an Arbor Mist, if you remember Arbor Mists from way back in the day.
How can any of us over 25 or 30 not remember Arbor Mist?
The brewery is not. It probably is not pronounced the way that they enjoyed pronouncing it.
Lean into it, Julia.
Oh, it is amazing. So there is an apricot. I don't know pronunciation.
It's okay.
It's a thing here.
It's fine.
By a brewery called My Cockslong. Don't tell me that was your nickname in high school.
In certain circles, it was.
Oh, God. Anyway, but yes, listen to the Neubert Report. They're on YouTube. They release their podcast. I think they record every Friday. But check them out. Even if you're not into hockey or sports, it's a good amount of banter between two guys that love Canadian craft beer.
Yes, and thank you again, and thank you all for being here for the first time or back again. Thank you to Rachel. Thank you to my mom, and I just want to say this was a ton of fun. Hey, Sam Adams Tap Room, Cincinnati. We've shouted you out for weeks now.
Yes.
We've talked about you.
Morgan Freeman shouted you
We've
out.
added you. Everyone, have a very, very, very fun weekend. This episode's coming out 2 days before Halloween. Mm-hmm. It's been a really crazy 2 years, or year and a half, year and 3/4.
Yeah.
Go have some fun. Be safe. Have fun. Be with the people you love. Enjoy Cincy Craft, and support your local businesses.
Absolutely.
All of them. Julia, what are you doing next week?
I think I'm going to be sitting at BC's Bottle Lodge Montgomery, having a beer, talking about podcasts with you.
Let's do it.
Let's do it.
And have a very, very